My name is Claire Bennett. I'm 38 years old, and I live in a quiet suburb in Oregon with my husband, Mark, and my stepson, Ethan. Life hadn't always been easy, but I'd found peace and stability in our blended family. Mark and I had been married for 5 years. He was a kind man, reliable and gentle, the kind of person who'd rather listen than speak. Ethan was 17 when I married Mark, reserved, smart, a little distant at first, but never rude. Over the years, our relationship evolved, though it was never quite the typical mother-son dynamic. Ethan's mother passed away when he was just 10 years old. That kind of loss changes a child. He built walls around himself, learned to be independent far too early, and rarely let anyone in. When I entered their lives, I was careful not to intrude. I didn't try to replace his mom. I simply wanted to be there if he ever needed someone. Slowly, he began to trust me. It started with little things, asking for help with laundry, then advice about school, or just sitting with me in the kitchen while I cooked dinner. By the time he turned 21, Ethan had grown into a confident young man. He was in college studying architecture and occasionally came home on weekends. Those visits became something I looked forward to more than I ever expected. He wasn't just my stepson anymore. He was my friend. It was a rainy Friday when everything changed. Ethan came home from school, soaked to the bone, but smiling. I wrapped a towel around his shoulders as he laughed and shook the water from his hair. "You're going to get pneumonia if you keep showing up like this," I joked. "It's worth it. Your cooking is the cure to everything," he grinned. That night, as we sat around the dinner table, just the two of us, since Mark was out of town on a business trip, we talked for hours. Ethan opened up about school, the pressure he was under, and how he sometimes felt lost, even though he was doing well on paper. "I don't really talk to Dad about this stuff," he admitted, swirling the ice in his glass. "He's great, but I don't think he'd get it." "I'm glad you feel comfortable talking to me," I said, placing a hand on his. He looked at me, then really looked. There was something in his eyes, a mixture of vulnerability and hesitation, as if he was holding something back. After a long pause, he spoke. "I have a wish. Something I've never told anyone before." I raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Okay. You know you can tell me anything, right?" He nodded slowly. "I've been carrying this for a long time. I just didn't think it was okay to say out loud. But you've always listened, always been there for me, so I figured if I don't tell you, who else can I tell?" I sat up straighter, sensing the weight behind his words. "Whatever it is, Ethan, I'm here. No judgment." He took a deep breath. "I just want to feel like I have a real family again. Not in the traditional sense. I mean, I wish things were different. That Mom hadn't passed. That I could go back and fix things. But since I can't, I just wish I had someone who understands me completely. Who cares not because they have to, but because they want to." His voice cracked at the end, and I felt my heart twist. This wasn't just a passing confession. It was the raw grief of a young man who had held onto emotional scars for over a decade. "I do care about you, Ethan," I said gently. "Not because I married your father, not because I have to, but because I genuinely care about you. You're important to me." Tears welled in his eyes, but he quickly wiped them away. "That's why I wanted to tell you. Because you've become the only person who makes me feel safe." I didn't know what to say. I wanted to reach out and hug him, tell him it would all be okay. But instead, I waited. Sometimes silence says more than words. "What's your wish, Ethan?" I asked softly. He hesitated. "That you'd keep being in my life, not just as my stepmom, but as someone I can truly call family. I wish you'd be more involved, not out of obligation, but because you want to. I guess. I want to feel chosen." I blinked back tears. It was such a simple request, yet so profound. He wasn't asking for anything material. He just wanted connection, reassurance, something he had been missing since his mother died. "I can do that," I whispered. "I want to do that. You don't have to feel alone, Ethan. Not anymore." We sat there in silence for a while, the sound of rain filling the room. That moment changed everything. From that day forward, our bond deepened. I started going to his design presentations at school. I'd send him care packages during exams and call just to check in, not as a parent, but as someone who genuinely cared. Over the months, I noticed something different in Ethan. He smiled more, talked more, and even made time for little things like Sunday morning coffee or grocery shopping together. He began to rely on me, not as a replacement mom, but as a steady presence. And I realized something too. I needed him just as much. After years of quietly caring for others, it felt good to be needed, to be someone's anchor. One summer, Ethan decided to intern at a local architectural firm in our city. He moved back home temporarily, and it felt like our little family was complete again. Mark was thrilled to have him home, though he never quite understood the depth of the connection Ethan and I had built. And maybe that was okay. One evening, as we watched a documentary on design and aesthetics, Ethan turned to me. "Do you remember when I told you I had a wish?" "Of course," I said. "Well, you made it come true. More than I ever expected." I smiled, heart full. "You made it happen, Ethan." I just said yes. The rest of the summer was one of the best times of my life. We cooked together, laughed, stayed up late talking about everything and nothing. And through it all, the bond we had became something sacred, something built on trust, respect, and mutual care. I don't know what people might think if they knew how close we became. But that's the thing about real connections. They don't always fit into society's neat little boxes. Our story wasn't about labels or roles. It was about healing, about saying yes to someone's heart when they finally feel safe enough to open it. Years have passed since that rainy Friday. Ethan is now a successful architect in Portland. He calls me every weekend without fail, still ends every conversation with, "Thanks for being there, Claire." And every time I reply, "Always." Because I said yes to a wish. And in doing so, I found a part of myself I didn't know was missing.